Hey guys, you are not going to want to hear this, but I am back with another video. So if you're new here, hi, and if you're coming back, thank you so much for subscribing. Let's just get into what I'm talking about today. So I wanted to make a video about the books that are being recommended on BookTok. It's TikTok for people who just recommend books, talk about books, and talk about tropes, characters, whatever. It's basically like booktube, but in short form on TikTok, and it's a lot of younger people, I would say, is generally. I feel so old when I talk about this kind of stuff. But yeah, so recently TikTok came under fire on Twitter. I say recently, I think it was months ago, but I genuinely have no concept of time. Could have been yesterday, could have been last year. They got under fire for not recommending enough books, and what I mean by that is there were a lot of people who said that BookTok only recommended the same, like, 3 books. So I think at the end of the video I'll talk a little bit more about the genuine criticism for BookTok, because I feel like just recommending the same books over and over isn't that serious of criticism for BookTok, but there is actual criticism that I'll get into after I'm done talking about these books. So I wanted to read 3 of the most popular books on TikTok. And the books that I decided on were The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, The Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, and Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. Shadow and Bone doesn't get recommended nearly as much as the other 2, but I did decide to read it because my friend had a copy in her apartment and I was able to read it for free. So that's really, if I'm being honest, that was a really big contributor to my decision to read that book. A Court of Thorns and Roses gets recommended on basically every TikTok I've ever seen. That's a hyperbole, but you understand what I mean. It gets recommended a lot. The first one, let's just hop into it. The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you kind of the premise of the book, and then I'll tell you some non-spoiler things, and then I will tell you some spoiler things, and I'll put up a timestamp so that if you want to skip that part, skip the spoilers, then you can. I won't force you to sit through spoilers. Anyway, so The Cruel Prince is about this girl named Jude who is living in the fairy world, but she herself is human. So she came to the fairy world after her mom's ex-boyfriend, whose name is Maddox, killed her mom and her dad after her mom took her daughter, their daughter, Maddox and her daughter, to the human world, and she married a human man, and they had Jude and her twin sister. And so then Maddox came and killed the parents and took all 3 of the kids to the fairy world. I could not have explained that in a more complicated way, but I hope and pray that you got the picture, because I'm not going to explain it again. So the story is basically just about Jude living in the fairy world, and she wants to become more powerful because she's a human in the fairy world. Obviously, they have like magic powers and stuff, and she's just a regular girl. So she wants to become stronger than them in a way, and it's just about her progression in the fairy world. There's also this guy named Carden who is an asshole, is a dick, and he's the love interest. Some non-spoiler things about what my thoughts on this book. I've seen this book recommended a lot on TikToks recommending enemies to lovers books. This one just comes up on every single one of those, and to be quite honest, I don't really feel the romance in this book. I like Jude, and I like Carden, kind of, sometimes. I like him at the end. But I just wasn't really feeling their romantic chemistry, and maybe you're not supposed to in this book because this is book 1 of a trilogy, so maybe that's something that's meant to develop over time, but I don't know. I mean, they did, so I just didn't really feel like the romantic chemistry was that strong in this book, but I definitely understand. Let me angle my camera down a little bit. I definitely understand why people consider this book enemies to lovers. I do like Jude. I should have talked about that first. Actually, I should have done this first. I gave this book 4 stars. I know that's high. That's very high. I know that. And when I use my critical thinking part of my brain, when I turn that on, I am able to tell myself, Natalie, that's too high, arguably, because this book's world building and fantasy elements were not that strong. And some of the, I don't know, just the world building was a little funky. There were a lot of things that I didn't understand or that weren't explained. So if I were to rate this as a fantasy book, I would probably rate it lower. And I think it does deserve to be rated a little lower as a fantasy book. But I rated this book based off of my enjoyment of it, which was about 4 stars. I really liked it, especially toward the end. You know, the pace started picking up, and I was like, this is great. I love it. The kids were onto something when they said that this was a good book. I like Jude. I think she's a fun protagonist. I think Jude is a bad bitch, in my opinion. Jude is the girl that all the other YA main character girls think they are. She's smart, she's determined, she's very power hungry at times, and I found that aspect of her personality really interesting because she was a bit morally ambiguous, and I thought that was really fun. It added something to the story that I feel like doesn't get added in a lot of YA books. I thought that she kind of breaks that mold of a typical YA female protagonist while she is still a typical YA female protagonist. You know, she's a white girl with brown hair. And now we're going to talk about Carden. Carden is, like I said, he's a dick, but sometimes he's not a dick. And isn't that how we like them, girls? Isn't that how we like our men? Not really, but okay, maybe I should save this for the spoiler part. So this is your transition into the spoiler part of the review. The book kind of gets into the cycle of abuse with Carden's character specifically. Carden he does some bad things that I'm not going to excuse, but he also is being abused. The book tries to make the point of the cycle of abuse and how the actions that are done onto him impact him and how he treats other people. And I think that is a valid thing to talk about. I think that it's definitely good to talk about serious things in books that are aimed for young girls because, you know, eventually you're gonna have to learn these life lessons and it might be a little bit softer coming from a book. So I don't think it's a bad thing if you talk about very serious topics in a YA book. I know that some people do think that's not great, but I think it's fine. I think it's good. Kids are smart, they can handle it. I do think there is a fine line between talking about the cycle of abuse and justifying one person's actions by pointing to a different person's actions. And sometimes the book kind of crossed that line, but other times I did think they made it pretty clear that Carden's actions were not justified. So that's just a little bit of a dicey topic, but all in all, I guess it's okay. Next, I want to talk about Jude's relationship with Maddox, who is basically her adoptive dad. He killed her parents, and now she's his dad. No, I really, really liked the relationship between Maddox and Jude. I thought that it was very interesting. It was very complex because Jude has been raised by Maddox, basically. He is basically her dad. He's been taking care of her for the majority of her life, and he's the person that she thinks of when she thinks of her caregiver. But she also really doesn't like him because he's a violent person, and he killed her mom and dad in front of her when she was a child. And they just have this very interesting relationship that I actually would have liked to see more of. Eventually at the end, when Jude does kill Maddox, I thought, that's great because he was pretty irredeemable at that point. But I did wish that scene had a bit more tension. Throughout the story, Jude is giving herself small amounts of poison to build up an immunity, and then at the end she just kind of poisons him and he dies. So, it was a good payoff, but I think it could have used a bit more tension to make it a really good payoff. The best scene in the whole book was the coronation scene where just everybody is getting killed. It's so good. It's some Game of Thrones type shit. Everybody's getting murdered, and I was having a great time. It was drama, it was betrayal, it was action. I loved it. From that point on, I was like, this book actually slaps. That scene was great. I loved it. My favorite scene in the book was when everybody was getting murdered. That was so good. I don't condone murder in real life, but so the next book I read was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. Yeah, I didn't see this book get recommended that much. I'm gonna be honest. I saw Six of Crows get recommended way more, which is a different book by Lee Bardugo. It takes place in the same universe as Shadow and Bone. Um, and you know, it makes sense that Six of Crows gets recommended more because it's better. Let's just start there. Six of Crows is better. Let me give you the premise of Shadow and Bone. So Shadow and Bone is about this girl named Alina who is a soldier in the fake Russian army. I forgot the name of the country. It's fake Imperial Russia. Imperial Russia? She finds out that she is a Grisha and that she has really strong powers of light. And so she has to go to the king to learn how to use her powers and learn how to come into her abilities. There's this guy called the Darkling. His power is darkness, and he's also a love interest. And there's this other guy named Mal who is her best friend, who is also a love interest. So that's basically the premise. That's all I'll say. And then I'm going to talk about some overview stuff. I don't have too much to say about this book. I talked about The Cruel Prince for fucking forever. I don't have too much to say about this book because, frankly, it was boring. There's nothing to talk about because nothing happened. I was bored for quite a long time in the book. I read this book really fast. I read this book in one evening because I was just trying to get to the good part. And I did. Yeah, the ending was good. I think the ending was pretty good. The pace picked up a lot, and yeah, the ending was fine. But the majority of the beginning and the middle of the book, the first 2 acts of the book, were just very slow. The pace was really slow, and it felt like nothing was happening, and it was kind of a training montage for a very long time. And a lot of it felt like stuff that could have been in a prologue to the actual story. And I just didn't really love that. But I can definitely see why this series is as popular as it is. I don't think it's as good as Six of Crows, which is the author's other series inside this universe. But I have heard that this series gets better in the second book. I think it's a trilogy in the second book. So maybe I'll read that and maybe I'll like it. But that's basically all I have to say for Shadow and Bone, so that's all there is to say. I was bored. Let's move on to the last one, which was A Court of Thorns and Roses. I can never remember the title. A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I've been avoiding Sarah J. Maas books for quite a while by now. I keep seeing her I'm sure that you've seen it too. You've seen rant reviews about Sarah J. Maas books, and you've seen people whose favorite book in the universe is a Sarah J. Maas book. And you know what? I think both those things are valid. Here's the thing. A Court of Thorns and Roses is a bit of a trashy YA book, and I don't say that to be mean. I don't say that in a bad way. I liked Twilight as a kid, okay? I am never going to sit here and make fun of teenage girls for liking something. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to sit here and make fun of little girls for liking something trashy because I like Twilight and grown men used to make fun of me for it. And that shit was stupid. I feel like people make fun of teenage girls for absolutely everything that they like and everything that they find enjoyable. So I'm not going to add to that. I'm not going to make fun of the kids who enjoy this series. I am going to possibly make fun of the series, but that is nothing against the girlies who like this book. I really mean that. I have nothing against the girlies who like this book, or the boys who like this book, or anyone in between who likes this book. The premise of the book is that there's this girl named Farah who is living in the human world, and one day she's hunting to provide for her family, and she accidentally kills a fairy. And so this guy comes, and should I mention now or later that this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling? It doesn't really fit naturally anywhere in the story, so I'll just say it now. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It's pretty loosely based on Beauty and the Beast. so you don't have to be super familiar with the story, although I'm sure you are. So Farah kills the fairy, and the guy Tamlin shows up at her door, and he's like, well, now you have to come live in fairy world for the rest of your life. And so she has to do that. It's kind of a life for a life thing where like she killed him, so now she has to go give her life to the fairies by living there. Tamlin is basically the Beast. That's his role in Beauty and the Beast counterpart. And he is cursed to always be wearing a mask. And so is his like crew, his court. Which I think is I think he got off pretty easy with that curse. The Beast was an animal, and he still had to make someone fall in love with him. Tamlin just has a mask on, and he's gonna make someone fall in love with him. If anything, it'll be easier, because she doesn't have to look at your face. So Farah has to go live in the fairy world with Tamlin and his court, and that's all I'll say for the premise, because I feel like anything else will be spoilers. So let's talk about my non-spoilers. I think this book is fine in the first 2/3 of the book. I think is fine and good. As I was reading it, I was like, I don't understand why people don't like this book. It's fine. Nothing bad has happened. Nothing bad probably will happen. And then a lot of bad things happened in the 3rd act of the book. It just went off the rails. I could not believe the shift that happened in the last 3rd act of the book. I'll talk about the characters real fast. Farah, I think, is fun. She's a bit I think she's fine, actually. I don't have any criticism for Farah. She's a bit of a typical YA protagonist, but whatever. That doesn't really matter. She's fine. Tamlin is like a piece of white bread, like a piece of Wonder Bread, if you will. I'm sure he's nice. I'm sure he's attractive, but there's just nothing going on. You know, there's nothing interesting there's nothing going on up there. There's nothing. So he's just kind of whatever. He's null. Characters are fine. Everything's fine. Everything about this book is fine. Like the writing style, I actually think is pretty good. I actually like the way that the author writes. I think she has really nice descriptions and it flows very well. She's very clear with her descriptions of what's happening. And it really is just the plot that makes me not like this book. And only the plot in the last 1/3 of the book, where it just absolutely goes off the rails. I really can't explain it in any better way than that. It's just absolutely mind-boggling, the shift that happened. Yeah, I'll just get into spoilers then. So the biggest thing that I've seen people, actually, I'll put that off until later. So the book kind of takes a turn after Farah goes back home to the human world, because like this is Beauty and the Beast lets her go home, whatever. She goes home to the human world, and then she finds out that there's trouble in the fairy court because Amarantha, who is the sorceress, has come to collect on her curse. Her curse, the time is up, and she's at their door, she's knocking, and she's gonna take her revenge or whatever the fuck she wanted. So Farah runs over to Amarantha's court, and she's notorious for being evil and powerful, so Farah is definitely gonna die. That's what everybody's telling her, is that if she goes, she'll definitely die. So she goes there, and Amarantha offers her trials. She has to she has to finish or complete, I think it's the word I was looking for, 3 trials. And if she can complete them without dying, then everybody can go home and the curse is broken. Or she can answer a riddle at any time and immediately the curse will be broken and she can go home. So Farah doesn't know the answer to the riddle, and this is the thing that I've seen a lot of people complain about, is that the riddle is very simple. And the answer is pretty obvious. If I even just say that there is a riddle in a YA romance book, you're probably already gonna know what the answer is just based off of context clues. I don't even have to say the riddle. You know what the answer is. I haven't said it, and you already know what the answer is. However, I'm going to give her a pass for this one because here's the thing, and I know that's controversial to give her a pass for this because it's pretty dumb, but here's the thing. Farah doesn't know how to read. And she can barely read by the time that we are at this point in the book. So she isn't familiar with abstract language or with riddles of any sort. And you can see that in her thought process. Once she is trying to figure out the riddle, she takes the words very literally, and she doesn't really allow herself to think if there are any double meanings or if there's any kind of metaphor in there, which is basically all that riddles are. They're just abstract language, they're metaphors, they're puns or whatever. So the fact that Farah isn't able to answer the riddle really doesn't shock me, because she's never had any sort of experience with that, and it makes sense that she doesn't understand how riddles work. My main criticism really is just that the pacing of this book just slows down the moment we get to Amarantha's court. We're at this point of high tension whenever we walk in. Everything is horrible and it's awful, and then the tension just slows down. So Farah completes the first trial. It goes horribly, but she survives. And there's so much time between trial 1 and trial 2, and then later trial 2 and trial 3, that it just kills any tension that was in the story. They go to parties every night, or like banquets, whatever, and it's just here we're gonna get into some of the real issues with this story outside of technical things. So there's this guy named Resand, and he gets introduced like halfway through the book as just like the bad boy who wears black and smirks a lot. I don't know. So Resand is just a freak, a really weird person, just genuinely not normal. And he makes Farah dress in this skimpy outfit and also paints her body with paint so that he will be able to see at the party if anybody else has touched her, because the paint will wear off. And it's just weird. It's just really weird. He doesn't know this girl. They're not dating. She's completely with somebody else. It's just not. It's just weird. And it made me uncomfortable just reading it. Just having that idea in my brain made me uncomfortable. But it does get worse than that, because he also drugs her every night and nothing happens. It's not that kind of story, but it's uncomfortable and I don't like it. It's just like the kind of thing where she starts acting more promiscuous and her inhibitions get lowered and stuff. So it's very much not a cute situation, and I don't like it at all. I just frankly don't vibe with that. So yeah, I don't like Resand because he's genuinely a bad person, just genuinely weird and not normal. But I also don't really like Tamlin that much because he's just Wonder Bread. He's nothing, there's nothing happening. I'm sure he's nice, which I guess is pretty low bar, but I mean, he hopped over it, so that's good. So I guess I like Tamlin more, I don't know. But I do have a feeling that Resand is going to be the main love interest in the second book because of just the way that it's set up. Like, of course. I think what's more important is the multiple racism scandals that have been going on in that community. I've been looking through some of the comments on some of the videos, and they're just, a lot of the times they're talking about multiple different racism scandals that have happened in a pretty short amount of time, it seems, which is not a great sign. And that also kind of feeds into the criticism that they've gotten from Twitter, which is that they don't recommend books that are diverse enough. All three of the books that I talked about today have white authors and primarily or entirely maybe white casts. So that's also just not ideal, because you should be reading more diverse books, and it's interesting to read more diverse books. Diverse books are good. It's not fun to read the same type of book multiple times. I think that's really the more important criticism that has been made, because yeah, it's annoying to see the same books recommended over and over again, but it's more important to focus on things that actually matter. So that's it.